Tá an áilte raibh cáchan seo nach ach go háire go spáinn sé go hagann rudí eile as cáciach idir imánaí bochtaí. I wish you all a very, very big welcome to this celebration. The book has been well launched, I think, in Dublin and a place called Cork. And we decided that we, in the west of Ireland, would also have our celebration of this wonderful book. And who else, who better to launch it than the man who has produced the reading of it at the moment on Radio 1, but Seamus Hosey. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends and fellow writers of our guest of honour here this evening, I'm very delighted and very privileged to be asked to say a few words on the Galway launch of Autobiography, one of the most long-awaited and most eagerly anticipated memoirs for a very long time. And it is indeed great to see so many people here, and indeed, by happy coincidence or otherwise, so many faces that are well known to David, many writers whom he has encouraged, whom he has to whom he has been mentor and whom he has guided over the years. And David, I have to admit to being in on a little bit of a ruse, a Machiavellian plot hatched by the Kennys and no better people to hatch Machiavellian plots. An exercise, David, in duplicity and deceit, because not only are we celebrating tonight the launch of Autobiography, your wonderful memoir, but we're also tonight celebrating a wonderful man, a friend, a great writer, and an editor, and a man who has left and is still leaving, and I hope will continue to leave, a wonderful legacy to Irish literature. We're here tonight, yes, David, to launch the Galway launch of Autobiography, but also to celebrate you. And indeed, there can be no more appropriate venue to celebrate somebody who has been at the core, at the very heart, at the very nerve centre of Irish writing in the last remarkable 50 years. There can be no more appropriate place than in Kennys of Galway, a place which is dear to the hearts of writers and readers, not just all over the country, but all over the world. And on your behalf, I would like to say thanks and congratulations to Kennys for having, again, the imagination, the insight, and the pizzazz and flair to organise this whole event. David Marcus, whom we're celebrating tonight, is absolutely unique in the history of Irish literature in the past 50 years. As a fine novelist and short story writer himself, and as a champion of Irish writing, an editor par excellence, a mentor to so many Irish writers, emerging young writers, a kindly critic, a man of vision and imagination, who has published and befriended almost every writer of significance and many yet emerging Irish writers over the past half-century. The cliché, allegedly his own lifetime, takes on a special resonance and meaning here tonight, because there has been no more benign influence on Irish writing than David Marcus. And his influence spans not just 50 years of historical time, but he also, in a unique way, bridges 50 years, half a century of our literary heritage. He bridges the canon that links the old order of James Stephens and George Bernard Shaw with the writers of the emerging Irish Free State, Frank O'Connor, Sean O'Faolain, of writers who in the 40s and 50s had to struggle to be heard, people like Samuel Beckett, Liam O'Flaherty, and in more recent times, David Marcus has championed and fought for space in magazine, in newspaper, and anthologies of emerging writers, some of whom you're going to hear in a little while. Because by a strange coincidence, some of the writers that David has published in recent years have come here tonight. Des Hogan has come all the way from Ballybunion by, as Joyce would say, a commodious vicus and streets. And we have writers who you'll be hearing presently. We're very lucky to have in autobiography the remarkable account of an extraordinary life, a life in literature, or the one that I'm supposed to be launching tonight. A memoir that is superbly written. It's a book that is modest, it's poignant, it's funny, it's philosophical, and it's shot through with remarkable insights into the minds and characters of so many brilliant writers he has engaged with over the past 50 years. Now, in talking to many Irish writers over the past few weeks who have had the good fortune to be guided, encouraged and befriended by David, many of the attributes of David have emerged time and again. Des and I spoke over the last few weeks to many writers in organising this night, and they spoke unstintingly of his gentleness, his integrity, his kindness, his old world charm and courtesy, his boundless energy, which is matched only by his unfailing enthusiasm, and that wonderful wry, self-deprecating sense of humour. Many writers who love and respect David are here tonight, but many others would have loved to be here, but circumstances prevent them. From London, Edna O'Brien sends this card and this greeting. Dear David, this is to wish you a happy and even bibulous evening at Kennys. You will, of course, have the wishes of many whom you have championed and befriended down the years. Bannock Edna. Well, now, knowing David's abstemiousness, I'm not sure about the word bibulous, but I think that tonight, surrounded as you are by friends and well-wishers, David, you might be allowed to break out and maybe have just, perhaps, a finger of pale, dry sherry. Benedict Kiely was unable to travel, but he sends you his love and good wishes, his admiration, and he said that at this very moment, coming up to 7 o'clock, in Moorhampton Road in Donnybrook, he and his beloved Franny, as he calls her, Frances and he, would be sitting down and toasting your good health. James Plunkett in Bray, now in his early 80s, recalls the deep debt Irish writers owe you over the years, and says he is with you too in spirit tonight. So many others, Jennifer Johnston in Derry, send you her love and affection. Paul Durcan, who is on a reading tour in England, wants to put on the record how much poets, as well as short story writers, owe to you a debt of gratitude for Irish writing in the 40s and 50s, and new Irish writing in the 60s and 70s, and your continuing work. Neil Jordan, whom you discovered, like so many other young writers, rang me yesterday to wish you well. On a personal level, I am very honoured and privileged to be asked, David, to say these few words, because, like so many here tonight, I've had my eyes and ears opened, my eyes opened to the windows of wonder of Irish writing, when in the late 60s I discovered the new Irish writing page in the Irish press, and later in your anthologies and in your own writing. And even though now people talk about the swinging 60s, but if you were growing up on a small farm in County Laois in the mid and late 1960s, you didn't have much access to contemporary Irish writing, certainly not to new young voices. And I can remember falling on poems and stories by names like Edna O'Brien, John McGahern, John Montague, Seamus Heaney and Evan Boland, names I was beginning to become aware of. But being excited too, realising that there were young ones about my own age, like 16-year-old Des Hogan, at the Brothers in Ballinasloe, writing short stories being published by David. Neil Jordan, Paul Muldoon, Moya Cannon, and Tom Duddy. Moya and Tom are here tonight too. Having the privilege of working with David recently, when we were recording extracts from his autobiography for radio, I saw again his professionalism, his dedication, his absolute attention to detail, the hallmarks of his work as an editor and as a writer. And I've had the privilege over the years of experiencing the hospitality of David and Ita and their daughter Sarah in Garville Road, in a home that is a centre of graciousness, civilization and warm hospitality. Shane Connaughton, the writer, said of David Marcus, "He has done the state some service, and all who read his book will marvel at just how much service." David's work as a writer and the patron of literature, has been devoted to the single-minded promotion of the primacy of the imagination as a shaping influence in our lives, and the validation of the vital role of the writer and his creations in Irish society, a role that is vital in exploring, defining, chronicling, and celebrating who and what we are. David, you have reaped a rich harvest to nourish and sustain not just the recent past and the present, but generations to come. On this night, as part of our tribute celebration, we're going to hear short readings from 6 of the writers here present, all of whom have been influenced, encouraged, shaped, moulded, published, and celebrated by you. And the first is one who is very near and dear to you. One with whom, David, I have to admit, I've been having a clandestine affair for the last few days. Because, unbeknownst to you, behind your back, Ita Daly, your good wife, has been aware that there was something afoot. Now, Ita is not only a fine novelist and short story, as you recognised many years ago. Your judgment then wasn't wrong. She came to your attention as a short story writer, as a winner of the Hennessy Award. But on this occasion, you proved that you were not just a fine judge of literature, but a fine judge of beautiful and interesting and fascinating women as well. David and Ita were married in 1972, and they have one daughter, Sarah. Ita is going to read from a short piece from her work. We know her from her celebrated collection of short stories, The Lady with the Red Shoes, from her novels Ellen, From a Single Reflection, and from many, many other areas. As a support, as the other pillar of that household, as a fine writer, and as somebody who has shared and should rightly share the triumphs of tonight, will you welcome Ita Daly?
David has discovered and launched many more illustrious writers than me, but I'm the one that caught him. And you've been hearing Seamus saying things about him, the man you know, but I'd also like to say that he not only is he all the things that Seamus says, but he's also a very, very patient husband and a very good father and simply a good man. And it's a great privilege for me to be asked to do this, and I'd like to thank Seamus and Des very much. I'm going to read just a short bit from my novel All Fall Down, which was published in 1992. Like the polar bears at Dublin Zoo, Bill O'Reilly swam on his back up and down with monotonous regularity. Unlike the polar bears, however, this behaviour was not an outward sign of psychosis. Bill O'Reilly and his world were doing fine. Known to his ministers and backbenchers as Chief, he had governed Ireland for 5 years, and during those 5 years he had brought about a transformation in the fortunes of the nation. Inflation was lower than in any other EC country. Unemployment was at the same level as Germany and falling. You see, this is out of date, 1992. Throughout the land, cement mixers were busy erecting shopping malls and office blocks. The streets were choked with cars, the pubs were full of happy drinkers. Ireland, for the first time since independence, was prosperous and stable. Some commentators said it was all due to external forces, the strength of a now closely united Europe, and the health and stability of the EMS. The left, shrinking daily but still quarrelling among themselves, said the whole thing was a chimera. One day soon the bubble would burst. Bill had no such fears, nor did he think that the miracle had been brought about by any phenomenon other than himself. Bill believed in his own greatness. He had always had faith, but had suffered many years of frustration, during which nobody seemed to share his faith. He had watched as lesser men were brought into the sun, listening to himself described the while as overweeningly ambitious. He had persevered. He had concentrated on images from the past. Lenin arriving at Finland Station, Hannibal crossing the Alps, Jesus Christ spat upon and mocked. he was reassured by an awareness of his own selflessness. He did not seek fame, nor power, nor wealth. He sought only to make Ireland great. How he loved this little country. He could weep, and often did, when he thought of all her past suffering. In his bath he would sing the old songs, moved to pity and a sense of his own destiny. He was fond of a bit of nookie, but he had never taken a wife. He had often been advised to, warned that he would never make it without the reassuring presence of the wife and kids. Despite this advice, and partial though he was to a well-tanned haunch, he was wedded irrevocably to Kathleen Nicolahorn. For all his patriotism, though, his respect for the language, his desire for unity, he was a pragmatist, and he knew, moreover, what the Irish people wanted. They wanted money in their pockets and their children at home in jobs. When the economy was sorted out, he would worry about the North and the revival of the Irish language, all in the fullness of time. And they were nearly there. It had been easy, and it had not been easy, and even now he could not afford to relax. Nevertheless, he was moderately pleased with his achievements to date.
Thank you very much, Ita Daly. Among the other writers who have sent greetings are Eugene McCabe, whom David published 47 years ago, I think, in Irish writing. Peter Sheridan, the filmmaker and writer. Lydia Doolan, who is fortunately away from Galway this weekend. Brendan Flynn, who organises the wonderful Clifton Arts Festival every year. Poet Mary O'Donnell, who sends special affection and warm greetings. Seamus Heaney sent a message to Des, and Des might like to elaborate on that later. We have it, and we'll be giving these to David later on. And Dermot Bolger has also sent his very good wishes. Our next reader, Desmond Hogan, has, as I said, come all the way from Ballybunion to here tonight, a measure of the love and affection and value that he and so many other writers value and show appreciating David. He was, as mentioned, published while still a student in Ballinasloe in secondary school, and he was indeed one of the great discoveries of the early days of new Irish writing in the Irish press. No less than 13 stories were published by David in those early years, and Desmond has since gone on to international acclaim as a novelist and travel writer with collections of short stories and his outstanding novel, The Icon Maker. Would you give a warm welcome to Desmond Hogan?
From caravans. Shortly after I moved into the caravan, a little boy with a Neapolitan black cow's leg and onyx eyes knocked at the door. I heard you like books. I have murder stories. Will you buy some? Do you want to buy a mint jacket? Asked Gabon, a traveller boy with a sash of down growing on his lips, who lived in a caravan near Finian's. He was wearing a platitudinous pair of army fatigue trousers. He went into his caravan and brought it out. It was malachite cream, double-breasted, almost epaulette-shouldered with a wide lapel. Finian wasn't in a caravan, went into read poems. The 19th autumn has come upon me since I first met my count. Both Finian and Gabon were in identical Kelly green fleece jerseys. "Will I tell you a joke?" said Gabon as Finian read. "Stand up and be counted, or lie down and be mounted." Finian and Gabon and I would have tea and half-moon cakes and coconut tarts. I'd buy a Limerick. Sometimes, when Finian would be out lamping for rabbits at night, he'd knock at the caravan door and request Mikado biscuits. The boys would come in at night and tell stories of the priest who used to go on pilgrimage to Lough Derg and bring a bottle of Bushmills around with him on the days of pilgrimage. The local woman who dressed in religious blue, spring gentian blue, and broke into the priest's house one night and put on his clothes. Of the single traveller man with a handlebar moustache who lived in a caravan and had a bottle of fairy liquid for 10 years, only using tiny bits of it every now and then. Of traveller ancestors who met up with other travellers they knew from Ireland on Ellis Island before entering the United States. Of a relative of Finian's who went to America, joined the American Navy, and was drowned while swimming in Lough Foyle during the Second World War, and his fleet was stationed there. Long ago in West Limerick, said Finian's father, they had rambling houses, went from house to house telling stories. Every year, several travellers in Ireland, buffers, make a long walk to commemorate days of travelling. One year it was Dublin and Patrick, County Down. Despite the insults, the contumelies heaped against travelling people, you keep on walking. On December 21st, the winter solstice, Finian and Gabon's smaller brother Tusser brought a candle each and put them in the menorah in my caravan and lit them against the winter emerald of West Limerick. Tusser had a fresh, honey-blonde turf cut, a pugilous fowl of a body, a rowing boat with a red sail had gone down the river that day. Patricius, had once lit the paschal flame in this country. When he couldn't sleep, Caesar Augustus would call in the storytellers. And as we had tea and Christmas cake, they told stories and jokes. And in the middle of the stories and jokes, came out with lines from traveller psalms. I married a woman in Ballinasloe. I have a lovely horse. And the lights of cars flashing in the caravan, it was as though all four of us were walking, were marching through the night.
Thank you, not just for reading, but for a wonderful performance. And certainly, I hope that the journey back to Ballybunion will be gentle and easy. But we really appreciate you making such a great effort to be here and know that it was a busy end. Our next writer, Moya Cannon, Donegal-born poet who has fallen under the charms and spells of Galway, is a testament to the new Irish writing page of the Irish Press as a platform for poets as well as prose writers. Moya's 1990 collection, The Ore, and her 96 collection, Murdering Language, were highly acclaimed. She's been editor of Poetry Ireland, a distinctive, unique and intuitive voice in Irish poetry. Will you welcome, please, Moya Cannon.
I suspect, that David Marcus tonight, who's a little bit like, school teachers who have, sort of middle-aged students coming up and, saying, do you remember me, looking blankly at them, saying, did I really, But he did. I think that this is I was delighted to hear Kennys Bookshop this evening. It's such a wonderful idea. I think this, Seamus spoke of falling upon the new Irish writing page of the Irish Press, and I remember what that was like actually in the 70s. I associated with the Edna Bookshop in Dublin, wet duffel coats and kind of army surplus bags, and all kinds. And I think that really David Marcus has really been a vehicle room to so many Irish writers, putting them on their feet, whether they deserved it or not. He published me I was under my Irish name at that stage, which I for various reasons, usually most of it was more cumbersome. I abandoned. Anyway, it's very embarrassing reading this. I think to Des, you know, it's rather like asking a writer to read their Julie. You know, it's a bit like, you know, lining them up in bobby socks and kind of short trousers, but I'll do it. This book was inspired by called Exiled, and I was going to a big, you know, affair with Ezra Pound's translations to the Chinese at the time, and an old man who lived next door to me in Donegal spoke of somebody else who had brought a girl out to be. He lived on the very near the point of this peninsula Horn Head. It was very windy and a bit wild. And anyway, he married this man who lived out, and some neighbour said, you know, of the girls who lived in the village, you know, said, you know, what kind of a man is that would bring a girl out to that place where the seagulls died of alone? That's my excuse. There's a misprint in this. I can tell you now, 20 years later. The line was probably better excised. I didn't mind at the time, I was so thrilled. Is it summer? The hills are purpling. Daily I watch as blossom and root smother the wind-white stone. Idly a seabird rises, high against the wind, higher, then falls to a numb tide wailing. Is it summer without the yellow wind's extravagance, without the windlinnet or the cuckoo, without slender-limbed trees and buds that prick the blue branch spaces? 3 walls to the sea, 1 to the mountain, yet I cannot keep the wind out. It comes battering with hammers, cold with knives it comes, filling all the corners of my house. It has polished my doorstep white as bone. 6 withering winter moons I've watched, grow round and white, then thin. On the narrow ledges, the guillemots have laid their pointed eggs. There's ice upon their wings. Is it summer? The hills are purpling. Idly, a seabird rises. Thank you very much.
Our next writer is one of the most anarchic, unusual, surreal and distinctive voices in recent Irish writing, proving that David Marcus is still open to the new, the unusual, the fresh, the invigorating, and that he has never allowed himself to be set as an arbiter, judge or promoter of any one style, any one voice, any one outlook on life. David told me once that a woman, I think, said to him on some social occasion, "You publish only what you like." He said, "That's right." And he has proven right so many times. Novelist, short story writer, Mike McCormick was born in London but grew up in County Mayo. His collection of short stories, Getting It in the Head, and his novel, Crow's Requiem, were both, I think, conjoined to bring him the Rooney Prize as one of the most exciting young writers of his generation. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike McCormick.
I never do that, but this thing has been hanging around so long in my desk that it's been going nowhere. And I thought that if I took it out into the fresh air, it would get some colour in its cheeks and grow up a bit. So it was born of a job I had in the mid-80s in London when I worked in the sewers, and this is I worked with my uncle, and the narrative voice is his, and this is some of the things we got up to. 2 or 3 pages, I think. We were a 4-man team at the time, working out of Kentish town, covering north of the Thames in a transit van. And I knew it then, 20 years down the road, I still know it. This is the cushiest job in London. After breakfast in the yard, we'd load up the tools and fill the 2 barrels of diesel, and Frank would go to the foreman's office and get the location of our manhole for the day. We'd hop into the van then, and the first stop of the day would be out to the Jippo's campsite in Hackney Marshes. We'd pull in there in one of the caravans and wait a minute or 2, and sure enough someone would come out to meet us. They're all big men, these Jippos, arms on them like gorillas, sound enough if you kept the right side of them. One look at the green van and they'd know the crack. What part boss? They always wanted to know who they were dealing with. We'd leave the talking to Frank. Bluesburg, Frank would say. West Mayo, you wouldn't know it. I know it well, he'd say. Many's a bad roll of lino I sold him it. What have you got? The going rate at the time for a barrel of red diesel was £25. We'd tip out the barrel on the ground and a crowd of hardy-looking gossers would roll it away. That's one of Murphy's vans, he'd say. Yeah, Kentish Town, in the very place. Throw the keys under her tonight, there'll be a ton in it for you. But I fuck throw the keys under her tonight. I'll be back for the empty tomorrow. We'll talk again, Sam. If it was a Thursday morning, we'd drive down to Archery and get the papers. 2 copies of the Mayo News, the Western People. Then another hour drifting around looking for our manhole, Jimmy calling out directions to me from the A to Z. Listen to this. As usual, Frank had turned to the courts pages. He had a great kick out of reading this. Listen to this one. Man causes havoc in public house with chainsaw. Last night, drinkers in Ballinrobe had a lucky escape when local man Thomas Hanlon, 31, the Mall, Ballinrobe, entered the Railway Arms at 10:20 on March the 21st with a chainsaw. Witness reported the defendant stood in the middle of the long bar and fired up the chainsaw and demanded a drink. I was only trying to get their attention, Your Honour. Joe spluttered, right enough, a 2-stroke Husqvarna and a chainsaw and a pub will get you plenty of attention. What did he get? Well, this is the best part. When do you hear this? Justice Garvin ruled, pending a psychiatric report, that the defendant be bound to the peace and his movements confined to within a 2-mile radius of the town's telecommunications mast. Leave to travel would be granted only with documented proof of gainful employment. Frank spluttered again. Gainful employment, my arse. That man was rightly fucked. When we found a hole, we'd lift the cover off and we'd pour the 40 gallons of diesel down the penstock. And the twins would section off the hole with bollards and caution tape. And we'd done all that, then we'd head off for the dinner. The nearest pub, we'd get the grub and the drink out of the first barrel of diesel, and we'd settle down with the papers then, talking and smoking, till the place got quiet in the holy hour. That was when Frank had put in his phone to the yard. I can see him now like it was yesterday. The phone cradled between his neck and shoulder, his boot tapping the wall. Our foreman at the time was Dave Pendler, a Cockney fella who didn't know an awful lot about what we were up to. I don't know, I could hear Frank say, 2 barrels of diesel have gone down in it and it's not moving. When was it left open last? And Frank would start nodding and then, well, if it's opened 20 years ago, it's going to be a bastard to move now. It's rusted solid. We need another few hours for that diesel to cut. Then another pause, and then, right, I'll see you so tomorrow, Dave, thanks. And that had us clocked in for 4 hours overtime. Thank you very much.
And we all hope that public airing and walking the dog in public will bring that story further along the line, and that we'll be seeing it in print very, very soon. Our next writer came to, I think, Irish literary attention about 3 or 4 years ago when she won the Francis McManus radio short story competition out of 700 entries. A new voice, and a very distinctive voice too. Claire Keegan, in her stories, whether they're set in Ireland or in the United States, charts that territory that's neither urban nor totally rural, neither contemporary nor historical, a sort of landscape of the imagination. And her collection of short stories, published by Faber in London last year or the year before, has got amazing reviews and has been hailed, and she's been festooned with a whole galaxy of awards. She tells a lovely story about a conversation she had with her mother when she was telling her about the book of stories coming out, and her mother said, "What's the book called?" And Claire said, "Antarctica." "Anticarty?" No, Antarctica. "What's that?" "It's a continent," says Claire. "There's nothing there." "Oh, that would be interesting," said her mother. And I think I can see where she gets her droll sense of humour. But to give a warm welcome to Claire Keegan.
Thank you very much. I met David at the Francis McManus Awards, inspired by Seamus. And I won 4th prize and Ita Daly was judging. And David came over to me and he said, "There's only one thing I want to know about you. Do you have any more stories?" And I said, "Well, I do." And since then, I can verify what Seamus says, that David has splendid taste in women. So it seems only appropriate that I should read a little bit. I'll just read a couple of pages out of the beginning of a story called The Ginger Rogers Sermon, which is the first story David published. Don't ask me why we called him Slapper Jim. My mother stamped his image in my head, and I was at an age where pictures of a man precede the man himself. The posters verify. Thin Lizzie with a V of chest exposed and Pat Spillan's legs racing across my bedroom wall for bold pores. I was the girl with the sweet tooth and taste for men and pictures. I have a photographic memory. I can see every tacky page of my cousin's wedding album, and a horseshoe and a cake, and a man slightly taller than the woman, and their feet stuck in the frosting. I parcel out my life in images the way other people let the calendar draw a line around them every month. And that time of Slapper Jim was the time of the strangest pictures. We killed pigs around then. We ate pork cracked in its own fat with a pulpy sauce. Putty grey and apple green, those were the colours of my home. Ma held my dinner plate with the tail of her skirt and talked through her day while I took dinner. You should see the new lumberjack your da hired. Slapper Jim, they call him, a great big fella he is. He walked in here, and I'll tell you nothing but the truth. He leaned up against the partition, and I thought the whole yoke was going to fall. My brother Eugene quacks his hand behind her back. I spear a slice of pork, and in my mind see giant and the earth trembling wherever he walks. A man who doesn't know his own strength, that can be dangerous. I've seen my father crack a cow's ribs just trying to slide her over in the stall. I gave him his dinner, and he was able to reach over on the handle of the saucepan without getting up. And he ate 11 spuds. 11 spuds, if you don't mind. You're lucky there's there one left. Ma rummages in the cutlery drawer for spoon, tapioca and stewed apples, I suppose. And I hope for sherry trifle, gooey caramel and dollops of ice cream. What's for afters? They leave me alone here on Saturday nights. Eugene goes too, even though he doesn't dance. Him staying home with me is a sissy thing to do because he's so much older. He's 7 years older. I was made out of the last of my father's sperm. I found that out just recently. I am the accident in the family. My father tells me I am the shakings of the bag, which I suppose is much the same thing. Dance mad for my parents. Ma says a man who cannot dance is half a man. And she's taught me the harvest jig, and the waltz, and the quick step, and the siege of Ennis in the parlour. She says dancing is good therapy, and makes her feel like she's in time with the world. Mostly we move her on foot, stooping under the rain and such, but dancing frees her up, oils her joints, she says. And everybody should know how to move in their own time. She puts the record on. I shake looks across the lino, and we whirl around the parlour like two loonies. I'm the man loon. I pretend I don't see her watching her reflection in the mirror of the sideboard as we pass. The walls of Limerick requires two facing two, so we hold our hands out to imaginary partners and move them into the places they should go.
Thank you, Claire. The last of our small selection of writers who have had the good fortune to come under the influence and encouragement of David Marcus is Jamie O'Neill. And his story proves that there is a God, magic still happens, but more importantly perhaps, David Marcus is still at the cutting edge, not just of contemporary Irish literature, but world literature. Jamie's novel, A Swim Two Boys, was nurtured, was to an extent shaped, and certainly directed towards publication by David Marcus. Jamie was working as a night porter in a London hospital, and over a period of 10 years researched and wrote this remarkable novel set at a turning point in Irish history, the years 1915-16. The novel, which David came across, I think actually through Jamie's short stories first. David directed him towards an agent, towards a publisher, and in a remarkably short time, well, 10 years in the making, but only about a year from being sold for the highest advance of any contemporary fiction, it is on our bookshelves. The reviews have been extraordinary, and Jamie is going to read. And as the Dublin gossip says, I was told not to repeat this, so I'm only telling you once, but a little birdie tells me that film negotiations are in progress at the moment for the film rights from an American producer. And this, I think, is even more remarkable given that the novel came out only in September. If you haven't read A Swim Two Boys, it must be on your reading list. And here to read an extract from it is Jamie O'Neill.
I'm greatly honoured to be invited here to read. This is a confession scene. Jim, who's one of the boys of the title, has been down the back end of the pier one evening where he met a soldier, and now he's going to confession. Jim joined the queue of penitents. It was impossible he should say these things to Father Taylor. He had no words for these things. His mind would not consider them, but physically, in a twinge of his head, jarred their notion away. Would Father Taylor know him? The lamp that lit the priest's profile would show his face if the priest turned. If the priest should turn and hunt him out of the confessional. There was the sin against the Holy Ghost that only a priest knew what it was. That sin could not be forgiven. If this were that sin, was there truly such a sin? The queue shuffled its few feet closer to grace, and he with it. And now he was inside. The confessional evening closed round him, the crucifix glimmered in front. A woman's mutters sounded through the space, forgiven Latin click. Was she a Protestant woman? And Jim had thought this worst was over, but no, he must suffer the scandal of speaking it again. Father, he was truly ashamed to tell it, but it was a soldier, Father. An English soldier. Jim didn't know. Was it the English soldier who lured him to the girl? It wasn't a girl, Father. With a testy shake of his head, which had Jim cowering lest he should turn, Father Taylor gave him to know it didn't matter her age, but it was the sin he should mind. He should...
Well, we're coming here at the end of the evening, and I'd like, on your behalf, to thank our 6 writers, most of whom have made, many of whom have made great efforts to be here tonight, and to emphasise that they are a representative selection of the hundreds of writers who have been so encouraged and have been so facilitated and have been have had good fortune to come under David Marcus's influence.
I'd like to start with acknowledgements and expressions of gratitude. I'm delighted and honoured to have Seamus Hosey launching my memoirs in Galway, and I really am deeply flattered by his very kind words for the work I have done to promote Irish writers and particularly the Irish short story. Seamus's own efforts throughout many years have shone his beams into far more corners of the Irish arts world than just literature. and indeed I bless him for featuring my autobiography on his fascinating Book on One programme, and also RTE Radio for giving me such invaluable publicity. I also want to thank 1,000 times Gillan Macmillan, who, in publishing my autobiography, gave me an experience that made me a very lucky and very proud person. And it's to Michael Gill himself I owe so much for starting off that wonderful experience by contacting me immediately he heard from a chance blessed mention by my wife Ita that I was writing my autobiography. And now my book is further honoured by being launched by Terry's of Galway. Almost certainly not only the sole bookshop in Ireland known throughout the world, but the only book family with such a long and incomparable history. It is to Des Kenny and all his family I express my deep, very deep gratitude. Now, it may be of some interest to those of you who are not aware of how I came to write my autobiography. The fact is that up to the moment I started to write it, I hadn't the slightest thought or intention of doing so. Not only did I not want to write it, I could clearly see that I didn't have any of the essential materials on which to base my memoirs. For a number of years after I retired from the Irish press, some of my literary friends frequently pressed me with, "You ought to write your memoirs, you really ought to." But I laughed at the idea because I knew what they didn't know. Despite the mountains of correspondence between me and both past and present famous Irish writers, amassed from 8 years of the quarterly periodicals Irish Writing and Poetry Ireland, which I founded in the mid-1940s, and the almost 18 years of editing New Irish Writing from 1968, except for one lone postcard, nothing remained. How all that correspondence disappeared is explained in my pages. But how then did I decide to work towards the advice of my friends that I ought to write my memoirs? It struck me that if the stock title for such a book, i.e. autobiography, were to be turned into a shop title by spelling auto, A-U-T-O, as O-U-G-H-T-O, it might catch the reader's eye. Fair enough, I thought. But even if all the basic correspondence hadn't disappeared, how could I imagine that any Irish publisher would be confident such a book with just a lot of no longer contemporary literary recollections would be worth chancing? Then what else could I offer a publisher? My mind went back to 1967, when on my return to Ireland after living in London for 13 years, I found that the Irish short story, which had previously some half-dozen excellent Irish periodicals as its market and platform, was now with almost nothing. So how could the great heritage and world reputation of the Irish short story continue without any encouragement? The Irish short story had always been an obsession of mine, and I came to the conclusion that the only way to find the much-needed new Irish short story writers was to give them a countrywide readership, and the only way to find such a readership was to give it short stories for nothing, a weekly page in a national newspaper. Luckily, it worked. But what new idea could I think of to inject into my autobiography, a very contrasting theme to just literary recollections? The vital idea involved what had never been other than my earliest and lifelong obsession, and which also gave me my perfect subtitle, Leaves from the Diary of a hyphenated Jew. Although I secretly gave up my religion when I was about 8 or 9, secretly so as not to hurt my parents, I never gave up my Jewishness or my Irishness. I felt, and since then have always felt, that I was an Irish Jew and a Jewish Irishman, and I hope to bring that out in my book. So, with all that in mind, in November 1999 I started to write, and to my amazement I found my memory springing to life. The recollections just poured out. Recollections not only of the writers, but also of meetings with them, of the important letters that passed between us, and of the very details those letters contained. By March 2000, just after 5 months, the book was finished. So I thought, or at least so I thought until just 2 weeks ago. For 2 weeks ago, I suddenly realized that the book had not been completely finished. Something had been omitted because something hadn't been remembered. It was not a big deal, nothing important, just a little story I would have liked to have in the book. Memory, as I'm sure you all have found, is like a detective who has filed away every little thing about you. You may have forgotten something, but memory brings it up just at its most annoying moment. And what's more, it holds back odd little details just to thwart you as much as it can. And that's how it happened to me. Only a few weeks ago, one night awake in bed, I suddenly recalled an incident in my youth. Just the bones of it. But with only the bones, I hadn't the blood. That is, the words that made the story live and provide both amusement and satisfaction. So I kept thinking that night and next morning, and eventually it all came back. Here's the story. I have 2 older brothers, about 5 years between me and the eldest. While we were in our teens, we were avid readers of all kinds of books. We used to get them from libraries, bookshops, and second-hand bookshops. It wasn't long before between us we had amassed a large, really large collection, and as we had nowhere suitable to store them, they were strewn on the floor all over the living room, which was where the family lived. After a while, our father decided to do something about it. He made a bookcase for us, about 5 feet wide with 4 shelves. With the books stacked in it, we knew he'd soon have to extend it. Many evenings every week, my father's friends would drop in for a chat, and they soon made a habit of having a good look at the books. Needless to say, they quickly began to ask if they could borrow whatever took their interest. Our father, of course, would never deny his friends anything, and we, of course, couldn't raise the slightest protest when books too often failed to be returned. Consequently, my brothers and I decided we'd have to do something about it. We had a long think until my eldest brother came up with the answer. He composed a special couplet, printed it out in copperplate fashion on a small white card, and pinned up the card on the shelves at eye-level height. The couplet was, "The benefits of friendship don't extend to wives or books. These borrow not nor lend." Then we waited for the result. The visitors came, read the notice, laughed at it, thought it was very clever and funny, but still borrowed the books. And still too many of them remained absent on leave. So we had another council of war and decided to bring out a big gun. We added one single word under our couplet, and we never lost another book. tongue-in-cheek, the word we added was Shakespeare. That shows the value of always choosing the words. Now, I was going to end with just one little tidbit for you, and I will. Before the first page of New Irish Writing appeared in the Irish press in April 1968, I told the editor, Tim Pat Coogan, that it would take me 3 months to find a brand new Irish writer. Just before July, a youngster of 16 sent me his first short story. I published it in July, dead on time, and continued to publish his work in the page every one of the next 10 consecutive years. He also won the Hennessy Literary Award and in 1977 the Rudy Award. He was, of course, one of Galway's own Desmond Hogan. So, thanks once again to Gillian Macmillan, to Seamus Hosey, to Kennys of Galway, and not only to all your kind people for coming here to join me this evening, but to all these writers who came also tonight to read their own work for me, and to the hundreds, I hope thousands others who gave me pleasure throughout all my life. I hope they continue to do so. Thank you very much.
I'll be formal part of the correct. I ask you to bear with me for 3 minutes, please. It's such a special occasion. We really want to record it for you this evening. I'm going to put this scrapbook here, and I'd ask you, please, any of you who would like to sign it, this goes to the Marcus household from here. I'd be very grateful. Finally, one more small point before just wrapping up. Joe Shaughnessy is waiting on the balcony out here. So if all of you writers could walk in there, if you don't mind, for about 2 minutes, accompanied by David and Ita, just to record the occasion for David. Thank you. And while the formal part evening is over, we are continuing the party in Brennan's Yard, because I'm sure there are other people who would like to pay tribute to David as well. Thank you all very much.
No.